Is there anybody here who doesn't know who P22 is? Please check out the Fierce Cats exhibit. There's also a special exhibit on P22 next to it as well. The title of this talk is The Legacy of P22, but I kind of like Friends of P22 as a subtitle. This is a panel of some pretty remarkable people. So, Miguel, why don't you lead off and introduce yourself and tell them what you do?
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Miguel Ordeñana. I help run the community science program here at the Natural History Museum of LA County. And my connection to P22 is I was fortunate enough to discover the first photo of P22 in 2012 and been a fan of his ever since. So thank you for having me today.
That's my boy. I know him, okay? All right, so my name is Warren Dickson. I'm the co-owner of Third Rock Hip Hop. We're an environmental education company for children where we teach them how to be more sustainable using hip hop influenced music and entertainment. But we're also helping out with wildlife conservation. And, you know, I've been working with Beth for years now with this project. And yeah, I'm just here to represent that bridge between, you know, community of color and conservation. And that's what I'm here to do. Let's get it.
Meija. I'm an indigenous scientist for my tribe, thankfully. So I work for the San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrieleno, Tongva. I've been doing this type of work since about 2020. But before that, my bachelor's in science was in marine biology. And my indigenous science background is mostly in native plants, thanks to Tongva elder Barbara Drake. So I have both disciplines. I grew up in both types of biology. And I think my biggest relationship to P22, which is a little sad, but I'm also thankful for it, is I really helped with the organization of having him buried in a good way in Native traditions. That was my main relationship with P22, was making sure that he was honored after he passed.
So as you can see, we have a really remarkable panel here. I'm going to just start off a little bit and put P22 in a little context because, you know, this is not a talk so much on mountain lion biology, and it is the legacy of P22, what he meant to so many. And his legacy was not just in LA. You know, his legacy was around the world. You know, this painting that we had commissioned shows, you know, the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing was just a jumping off point. P22 continues even after his death to inspire more crossings, more coexistence, and a new view of the animal world and our place in it and our relationships with it. So P22 started out as kind of a local hero. Who remembers reading that first LA Times article? Yeah, he wasn't even named in the headline. It was Mountain Lion Finds a Home in Griffith Park. It was August 2012. And I think, like most of you, that was my first introduction to him. Miguel's the only one who probably has a different one, but he'll get into that. And he kind of remained a local hero until Steve Winter, who spent 15 months getting this shot from remote camera, the 2013 December issue of National Geographic. This was like nothing people had seen, a mountain lion under the Hollywood sign. It challenged my preconceptions. I've worked in places like Yosemite and Yellowstone. And so for me to see a wild animal under the Hollywood sign was quite shocking. But this is where P22 also became a global influencer, what I dubbed the Brad Pitt of the cougar world. You know, handsome, beloved, and struggles with his dating life. But for me, this is the photo that tells the story even more deeply, which is that for all his star power and celebrity status, he actually represented what living in an urban landscape meant for not just him, but all his relatives in the Santa Monica Mountains. And for that reason, this is my favorite photo of him. This is what he faced every day. This is what he had to look at. This was the challenges. But he made it work. And to me, I think that is another reason his story, his being resonated with so many, is that despite the challenges, he persevered. And despite the improbability of his existence, he reminded us that we, even with our best efforts, had not yet fully banished wildlife from a place like Los Angeles. You know, the fun we had with P22, I think, is what resonated. And people would create Tinder accounts for him, matching him up with Brad Pitt. You know, he was something that people connected to in very different ways. He was a question on Jeopardy. I mean, you know how famous you have to get to be a question on Jeopardy? And when he passed away, which for, you know, those of us who've been working to protect him was hard enough, but it resonated around the world. I got to sit with P22 the day before they had to euthanize him, and it was pretty remarkable. I'd worked to protect him for over a decade, and I had never met him yet. But he was still P22. I could feel his breath on me. I told him he was a good boy and that he had changed so many minds. Not bad for a boy small town boy who came to Hollywood. But front page of the LA Times when he passed. Go ahead, Miguel. Rolling Stone magazine covered his death. Rolling Stone. He was trending on Twitter the day he died. Do you know what it takes to trend on Twitter?
I'm still trying to trend
yeah,
on Twitter.
Warren still hasn't
just to
trended
put that
on
out
Twitter.
there. You know what I mean?
And what we saw the day he died, my eulogy, which you can get at our table, had 10,000 shares in like 5 minutes on Twitter, is that people needed, across the world, a communal way to grieve. So, crazy enough, in a month we pulled around a celebration of life for a mountain lion at the Greek Theater. And it crashed Ticketmaster like Taylor Swift. The connections to P22 is really what we're here talking about. And P22 inspired the world's largest urban wildlife crossing. He's inspired crossings all over the country and all over the world. He's inspired a new ethic of coexistence. There's so much science that he has inspired advancing. But to me, just as important as that wildlife crossing and who's driven under it, it's amazing. We would not have a wildlife crossing without P22, is the connections that he has helped foster, which you're going to hear about. And Miguel will remember this moment. This little boy read a letter to P22 and showed his connection to him. The little boy read a longer letter about how he loved P22, and he said, P22, I'm sorry you're scared and lonely and sad. I've been there before. That was a second grader. And so for P22 was an emotional connection for him, something that inspired him. And I think that's what P22 did for us all and in really different ways. So you're going to hear about some of that right now. I want to start off with, and some of you alluded to it, but you can go into a little more depth, like what is your connection to P22? How did it start? And maybe how did it change? Miguel, you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. It started with this for me.
Puma butt. You have to say Puma butt.
It is, yeah, a puma butt, the most memorable butt photo I've ever seen. It was part of a grassroots effort and in my neighborhood park. So all of that kind of backstory really made it really impactful for me. I was actually living just right outside of the park at the time as well in an apartment with my now wife, Kami. And it was an amazing opportunity just to be in the park and study this park and kind of give back to this park in my own way, growing up going there and being inspired by it and all the wildlife in there. And I never imagined seeing a mountain lion come across my screen. Biologists and everybody was like, it's impossible for that to ever happen. But then out of nowhere, I see this come across my screen after going through grass photo after grass photo. And it really blew my mind. And it was like a chupacabra, Bigfoot sighting moment. And I remember I jumped out of my chair, it was a little swivel chair in my sunroom, and was reaching for my little Nokia phone. It wasn't there. And then ran 2 blocks barefoot to my car. Didn't step on any glass, fortunately. And then called my now beautiful wife, Kimi. She didn't pick up the phone. It's okay. And then I called the biologists on the project. It was called the Griffith Park Connectivity Study. They didn't pick up either. And so all these things were rushing in my head. I was like excited, proud of this moment, but also worried because a mountain lion had just gotten killed in downtown Santa Monica just months before by Santa Monica police because they didn't know how to react. And I was wondering, is this mountain lion going to get trapped in this backyard? And once I share this with the world, what's going to happen to this poor individual? And but fortunately, I was really proud of how LA responded to his presence. Everybody rallied behind him immediately, and that love and passion grew over the years. And then I became passionate about documenting this moment. I didn't know if it was going to last a week or a year, but I wanted to capture every moment, and so I started photographing him in the park. And I thought that was going to be a fleeting moment, but it ended up being a decade of sorry. Yeah, it was an emotional journey, and I grew up as a person as well. I became a biologist, joined the museum. I became a father, a husband, and all these kind of moments happened in the 10 years. And what it reminds me of is not only the journey ahead and what I'm gonna, what his legacy is gonna be and how he's gonna impact the future generation, but also where I started. And that starts with my father and being a proud descendant of immigrants, my mother introducing me to the park. All these memories kind of flood through my head as I see these photos because it reminds me of my bond, my connection, where it started, my barriers to connect with nature. And now my son and my daughter seeing puma tracks in Griffith Park and knowing what coyote scats are in coyote poop. If you don't know what scat is.
That's poop,
coyote
guys.
Poop is. And,
That's poop.
And seeing not only Griffith Park as a place for biodiversity, but their neighborhood as an ecosystem as well. And everybody thinks that that's this privileged perspective, but that perspective should be everybody's right. And I'm really glad that my child and all other kids that are in this room will see their ecosystems and their neighborhoods differently, make these places an easier place for wildlife, and also bring communities together around biodiversity. I'm excited just to see how that legacy can continue to be impactful with this bridge, with this crossing, but with also human connections as well, and him acting as actual bridge to bring people and nature together. Thank you.
I think it's such a good point, Miguel. You know, P22, people connected to him differently, but he also connected us to each other. So, Warren, so how did it start and how's it going, your relationship with P22?
Well, first, let me say this. His son wanted a shout out. Congratulations on checking that off right there. Yeah, we checked that off.
I love you, Miguelito Irea.
Yeah, there we go, right there. So my story is a little different. Beth knows, first year we're riding around, right? I'm taking her to each one of the fundraisers. And I wasn't even supposed to be doing that, but the guy that we hired to do it didn't show up. So this is how the universe works, right? So I'm driving her around throughout the week, and I'm learning more about it. And she invited me in one of the parties that they were having. And I'm listening to them talk about mountain lions, listening to them talk about, you know, how to protect them. And the architect on the project, he taps me and he says, you know why this lady is doing this talk? He said, because a mountain lion ate her goat. So I'm looking at him like, why would she ever want to do something like that, right? And then when I focused in, I hear a lady ask a question, and she was like, if a mountain lion is attacking our pets, what can we do to protect the mountain lion? So right there, I was like, I'm in the wrong place. This isn't making any sense to me. And Beth and some of the attendees there, they asked me, what do you think about this? What do you think? I said, man, you white people are crazy. That's what I think. But then I told him, I said, see, black people just want you to love them like you love mountain lions. That's it. And I think that right there kind of opened both of our eyes, right? Like it was something that wasn't said out loud, I guess, you know? But I think the more I learned, the more I started to see correlations between P22's story and my story. And not just my story, but people's stories that's in my community where I come from. So I knew at that moment, somebody like me who had the access to even learn about P22, I have to become a bridge for people in my community in this topic and see how we can help each other. So P22 kind of became a brother of mine, and I had to find some type of way. So I used music, and we created the song We're on the Move Again. If some of y'all heard it, okay, let's get it. But yeah, so I spent time with Beth just trying to find more ways for us to bridge this gap, because his story was not too different from ours. He is trying to make a way to survive, right? Avoiding obstacles to do that. We have people in our community like Tyrese. Some of you guys probably know him as the black bald-headed guy on Fast and Furious. But he's from my community, and we don't see a lot of other people making it like him where we come from. So in a way, I've seen us building a crossing to make it easier for other wildlife to experience what P22 experienced. I figured that would be a way for us to see that we're fighting the same fight in the community where I'm from. We need to build bridges and crossings mentally to help those people have another opportunity like Tyrese did. So we kind of been finding these correlations and just working on both because it all matters at one time, not just one topic. So P22 was my introduction to this wildlife conservation.
Thanks, Warren. And you know, our friendship has taught me a lot too about, and you know, we have worked together for how many years now?
It's been a lot of years.
And you know, I remember when he first said that to me about, you know,
You white people are crazy?
You white people are crazy, and why don't
Yeah.
white people care about black people as much as mountain lions? I mean, the younger me might have taken offense, but I remember I was like, you know what? That's a good question. Let's explore that together.
Let's explore
and
that more.
Warren's a really talented songwriter. You should also watch the If I Was Wild video, which we funded so he could do it. It's an incredible song he wrote about the juxtaposition between P22 and social justice causes.
Absolutely.
It's really well done. But thank you, Warren. It's
thank you.
what a journey. And last but certainly not least, Samantha, your connection to P22. How did it start? How's it going?
Yeah, so my first, the first time I heard of P22 was that 2012 article. And my first thought was just, that's really sad. But at that time, I was just really trying to pursue a degree in marine biology. And so I was just kind of hoping that something good would happen. And I didn't know that it would be me doing the good thing later on. I mean, so I wasn't around a lot for his life. But when he passed, I was working with the Natural History Museum on some things. I was working for my tribe. I was working on a major restoration project. It was an acre of land with 40 tons of trash on it and 90% invasive species right on the edge of Eaton Canyon. And including a lot of very flammable eucalyptus back in 2022. And so I was working on this really difficult restoration project, and I was working in all of these Native American affairs that I had never wanted to pursue, but I was called to do it, and so I was stressed. And then I hear about P22 being captured, and I just start crying. As you could see with Miguel telling a story, P22 always gets me crying. I'm also just a Yorita in general. But it was a really sad moment for me because I could just really relate to him. And I think that the beautiful part of Tukuro Mwehe of P22's story is that everyone has a different angle that they relate to him with. And so the way that I related to him is I'm from a federally unrecognized tribe, which means that the federal government does not officially recognize us. Our chief was welcomed by Biden when he when he expanded the San Gabriel Mountains, but we are not a federally recognized tribe. And that is because of the property value of LA County. And that is an instance all across America, but especially in the coast of along the coast of California. And so for P22 to be where he belonged, but to feel like he shouldn't be there felt very relevant to me, especially as I was working on a major restoration project where all of the native plants were struggling to try and find a space under just tons of shade from invasive species and tons of trash from not very nice people. I was also learning more about Monarch the bear, who was on our California state flag. And when Monarch was captured, he was stuffed and put on display. And he's still up in a museum exhibit up in Northern California now, which I don't personally agree with. He was the last grizzly bear to ever be in California. That's why he's on our state flag. And so with P22, when I heard about his eventual passing, I cried again. And I was like, I don't want him to be like the monarch or like Monarch the bear. Like, he has to be buried in a good way. Like, I was crying on the phone with my mentor, and we were like, this has to happen in a good way. And thank God, thank Creator that the Natural History Museum reached out. And they were like, we want to do this in a good way. We were like, really? Because usually we're either a box that's checked off, oh, we talked to the native people and they don't like what we're doing, but we're going to do it anyway. Or we're just completely ignored. And this time it was a really wonderful collaboration where we really worked together. And we worked with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we found a good private location for him. There was the most controversial talk, which I was still incredibly thankful for, was just taking some samples from him for future testing, which I was on board for as someone who studies Western science. But there were other Native people who were not for that, because in traditions we're supposed to bury our ancestors complete. But I was still thankful that was the most contentious part, because usually, like I said, we're ignored. And then we had the ceremony. I believe Miguel was there. I know you were there. And it was beautiful. It was really a wonderful ceremony. And it was definitely one of the most memorable traditional burials that I've been to. And so I almost brought the illustrations that I did of that day, because I didn't take any photos. I just drew some things that I felt were notable, but I didn't even want to show those today because it still feels too fresh. I didn't even use Tukuro Mwehe's Tongva name for a good year. I didn't even tell my story for a good year in respect of his memory, and so those photos still felt like they were carrying too much to be on public. But I'll just describe what we did. We buried him in a good way, and we buried him in this bundle of red cloth. And one of the elders from the Tataviam tribe had a little yearling oak that was about this tall, and we found a really private location. We held a ceremony, and we buried him under that oak, so that way he would never be disturbed. And so he's only known by a very few handful, and we'll be keeping it that way. But everyone knows that he lived in Hollywood, and I still believe that some of his spirit is there to this day.
Absolutely.
It was a really beautiful ceremony, and a red-tailed hawk came out. What I love about that location is he gets the quiet he never had in life.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It was such a beautiful ceremony.
As far as like a piece of Hollywood coming with him, I was able to arrange a boulder from Griffith Park to be transported over to the site to be part of the ceremony, and so that was basically requested by the tribes. And so, I'm glad that that's there, and that he had such a beautiful ceremony.
Yeah, and although for good reasons that location is being kept secret, we did put out a call for proposals of a P22 sculpture in Griffith Park as a place you can go honor him. And we will have some announcements about that soon. So that's exciting. I'm going to throw out a question I didn't put on the agenda. So feel free not to answer it, but it's a quick one. What was your favorite? So good. P22 lived for 10 years in Griffith Park. He had so many moments, both sometimes a little, oh no, did he really do that? Sometimes fun, lots of run-ins with the paparazzi, run-ins with celebrities. So I want to throw out to you what your favorite P22 moment was. And I'll tell mine quickly first so you can have a second to think. But, there were so many for me, but one that I thought showed how Hollywood he lived was Alan Ruck. Remember Alan? We all know Alan Ruck. And for me, will always be Cameron and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But Succession, I think, is what he's known for with most people. Hollywood celebrity. He was out on his deck one night. He tells me this story. And P22 walks by. And he said, I was a knucklehead and said, hey, P22. Screamed it. And he said, he just ignored me. And as he's telling me this story, I'm thinking of that's what we would do if we saw Alan Ruck on the sidewalk. We'd be Cameron, right? That's what I would do. And he'd probably would have ignored me. But it was just such a moment of improbability for a mountain lion, which is here, this is Hollywood celebrity, but calling to a mountain lion celebrity only in LA. So what was one of your favorite P22 moments? Anybody? No particular order? Okay.
I'll start. I have so many, obviously, but a couple that kind of run together is I would photograph him for 10 years. And there were moments where I wonder if he's ever around when I'm doing this. I never got to see him in person unless he was captured and we're putting a collar on him. But it was a moment where I looked at my footage and he was there 5 minutes after I was looking at the camera. And so he was literally probably on a hillside in the canyon looking at me as I was doing my thing, because you would go through that canyon once a week. So I was like, one of these times he's going to be around. And he definitely was there that time. And then another time I was going into one of his kills where he would leave leftovers of what he ate. And I was like, what is this? I was expecting just to find a deer, and there was an owl on top of the deer, dead. I was like, wow.
Got deep.
They're known as stealthy ambush predators, but he was so stealthy that a barn owl was eating on his deer kill, and he was able to sneak up on the owl and kill the owl.
Wow.
So anyway, those are two that just came to my head. But yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's a big one.
I think one of the things that I love about P22 is that he reminds me of why I'm so stubborn. I try really hard not to use the word nature. And that's because in my traditional language, in my Tongva language, and in many native languages, there's no word for nature because we're all in a big biome all together as organic beings. And you're never, even if you were up on a spaceship, I'm sure there would be some little spider that found its way in. And even if there was no spider, we're still more bacteria cells than human cells in our body. That's a weird, but absolutely true biology fact. And so P22 was an urban guy. He was an urban cat. I remember you telling me at the funeral, he didn't, he never really ate any of the neighborhood cats. He would just kind of look at people. He was we as Tongva people, we joke that we're urban natives or we're urban Indians. He was an urban mountain lion. And I look at Miguel's photos and you can totally tell sometimes that he's yeah, I'm that lion.
I'm him.
Me.
I'm him.
So he just he really showed people oh, we're really not so different from the other things that live on this planet. And that's why I don't use the word nature, because it naturally makes us separate ourselves from the things that live in the wild and the things that live in the city, when really those boundaries cross all the time. Absolutely. And they should cross even more often than they do now, because then we'd have less mosquitoes and other things that bother us. And we'd have more wildflowers and and beauty around us. And so I just like that he showed people like, oh no, I'm an urban lion. Like, I'm gonna be here and it's cool. And that's what he did. And he gave great photos in the meantime. And it's really cool when you really get to see an animal's personality like that.
He was a movie star. Look at those photos. He knew how to pose.
Brad
You're
Pitt.
right.
It was, man. Hey, and if you ever want to do some photography for me, just set up that camera right there.
I'll need really good lighting.
Yeah, that one did it right there. I don't know if I have a favorite P22 moment, but I will say what I enjoyed during this journey was me seeing like my community. I don't think you do. Does anybody in here know where Watts is at? Okay, that's where I'm from. For those that don't know where it is, if you know where Compton is, we're next door to Compton, okay? That's usually the best way to describe that. But to see a community like that just have no idea about P22 or very little understanding about P22, go from that to every time they see a mountain lion on TV, they're like calling me like, hey, your boy's on TV. That's your boy, huh? I'm like, they calling him my boy now. Where's Beth at? Is she gonna talk? What is Beth talking about this? So I think on this journey, just seeing how many people in the hood just started loving P22, I think those are my favorite moments. It was more like the spirit that he had flowing throughout our community, right? To the point where in Watts right now on Compton and Century, you'll see that we put a P22 mural over there. So that was big, just seeing how his spirit resonated with all the people in the hood. Those are my favorite moments of P22.
Yeah, for me, like to add just to that is just like amazing to see how many people connected with him and never met me ever. But we would do these bat roost counts. We still do them in the summertime. And that's another way he inspired me, right? Like I'm looking for bats in the middle of LA because I found a mountain lion in the middle of LA. And so now we're looking for bats, but not only in the same way I used to, but bringing the community along with us so that they're part of the discovery process. But anyway, when we do these in the summertime, sometimes people have registered so they can ask me P22 questions. And then they stick around and they enjoy the experience of the bats, and then they come back for that. But yeah, it's crazy how impactful he is and how he's, again, acting as this bridge between people and wildlife in the community.
Absolutely.
He really does. I do a lot of talks across the country. I'm working on more wildlife crossings, which P22 has inspired. I'll be in New York City and people know P22. I was in Denver giving a talk, and this woman pulled up from Colorado with a P22 license plate, not a bumper sticker, a vanity license plate that said P22. Senator Padilla last year introduced bipartisan legislation about wildlife crossings with the famous P22 photo next to him at the hearing. So this cat has inspired so much, from wildlife crossings to coexistence, to art, to music, to plays, to books, to films, to anticoagulant. Where's Poison Free Malibu? Is Joel here? Go see. To anticoagulant or anti-rat poison legislation. You name it, he has inspired so much. So I think the final question I want to toss out to, he really has changed minds. He has influenced action around the globe. But as his legacy continues, what actions do you hope people will take? What do you want P22's legacy to be, in your opinion or your community's opinion?
I think not everyone has to be a perfect, climate justice warrior person, but I would say just do your part. I mean, advocate for the wildlife spaces because they benefit everyone. Make sure that they're accessible and get out there and learn who lives on this land with you. Learn who your fellow relatives are. Because P22 was kind of an indicator species. He's not a keystone species, but he's a top predator, right? And so for him to be in the Hollywood Hills, that means that there had to be a whole other ecosystem that was able to sustain him. He didn't eat great, but it was still an ecosystem that sustained him. And so one of the best things that I think people can do is just go out and learn what plants are around you, because then you'll start learning what insects are around you. Then you'll start learning what animals are around you. And before you know it, you're taking camera videos of P22 or some other incredible phenomenon that was not supposed to happen in the urban areas. So get curious, learn things at the Natural History Museum, and then take it home with you.
Great. Yeah, it's what did E.O. Wilson say? It's the little things that run the world. And you're not going to have a mountain lion without the right plants. You're not going to have a mountain lion without the plants that set up the whole basis for the ecosystem. So really good point. Warren or Miguel, who wants to go next? How can people act? What is P22's legacy in your mind?
Well, I hope what happens is people start to also get out there, like you said, and learn more. Because knowing helps with anxiety, for one, right? Because when you're in a state of the unknown, that's when you overthink, and that's when you just put more, pressure on yourself, and you just live in fear more. So I think the more I learned, the less I was fearful when I was getting outside like that. But what I hope is that people start to look for correlations, not just with wildlife, but with us. Like, look for correlations more instead of our differences, because once we see where we're alike, that's when we'll have more empathy for each other, because we won't see each other as separate cultures, separate races. We'll see each other as brother, sister, mother, father, right? And like you said, that's also with wildlife. It's not like wildlife isn't a part of our family. They're a part of our family as well. So I hope that he just served as an example of what togetherness can do and how to create empathy. Because that first story I told you about white people being crazy, what I actually got a chance to see for the first time was what empathy really looked like. So I hope that that's something that can really continue, and we continue to just help his voice live on, And by the way, 22 became my lucky number, by the way. I don't know if I ever told you that, right? My birthday is May 22nd, right? Now I'm connected to P22, and I went to my first football game, right? And I ended up sitting on accident next to one of the players' grandmother, and we're close till this day. Plays for the Rams. And guess what his jersey number was? 22. So yeah, let's 22 it up. Let's go.
Yeah, for me, it's on a similar kind of goal of just being a lifelong learner and encouraging people to be lifelong learners. And when you do that, you have to kind of eat a big piece of humble pie. And I think hopefully people can learn to do that more, because it allows us just to be better listeners. And when you listen, you grow. And I mean, I can speak to my knowledge of, like, I thought I knew a good amount about wildlife conservation, the ecological significance of wildlife and species, and even the cultural significance of wildlife, but I didn't. And even I learned that when we had these long overdue conversations with tribal members about what these, not only species, but sometimes individuals have in their culture, and how they kind of perceive the world. And I think for me, I still kind of perceive the world in the way I have, but also I have this additional perspective that allows me to be more empathetic, allows me to be more supportive of wildlife, and allows me to be a better community member. And I hope that institutions like this as well are also not continually just sharers of information and doing it in these really engaging, cool ways, but also good at listening. You saw how the P22 exhibit transformed into a memorial space. And that memorial space was filled with memories people had of P22 and really sparked conversations. But hopefully we can go a step further and not only receiving this information, but being responsive to that information and making us better at educators and connectors between people and wildlife. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great connections here. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. I mean, these are deep, meaningful connections. Thank you for sharing. I bet everybody in this audience would have a different one as well. Again, he connected us differently, but he connected us to each other. And I think for me, he reminded us we are wildlife. He reminded us that wildlife are individuals and we should be thinking of them as such. And he reminded us that wildlife are our neighbors. And I think that is one of his biggest legacies around the world, that we indeed can live with wild animals because we are one of them. Please give a hand for this amazing panel. I think they'll all be around afterwards if you have some questions.
Thank you, Beth.
You see, he wanted a shout out. I'm getting him on stage. What's up, man? So this is how we're gonna do it, okay? When I point to you, we're gonna scream out, "We're on the move again." Like, we're on the move again, okay? You already know it's like this. We're on the move again. You guys got that? You think you got it? We're on the move again. Okay, here we go. This is the story of P22. See, I woke up this morning and I just started roaming with no map to show me where, but I just started going. See, I used to be small and then I started growing and I started to think about all I wanted. Then I traveled around trying to find my way. Okay, tell me that you go with me.